get started. Josh, if you want to, please put us on record now.
Everybody, I got to apologize. I'm eating my lunch here. I just literally got out of another meeting, so I have not got up from this chair, and my wife just brought me my food. So sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, we do have a quorum. And Laura mentioned that Colette will either not be here or due to other commitments or join later. First off is the approval of the agenda, which Josh has up on the screen. I don't know if it could be scrolled up a little bit, we can see it all, but are there any changes or additions, deletions, comments on the agenda?
Looks good to me. Maybe we'll have enough time to look at the resolutions, but
I hope so.
you front loaded it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
So
gonna
I
take
make a
the
motion to approve it.
Okay, Bob's moved that it be approved. Any second?
Second.
Okay, Laura, any discussion? Okay, no discussion, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's good. I'm gonna consider that to be unanimous. Okay, next is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting, the May 13th meeting. Just a notation down at the bottom of it, of the minutes. I obviously was not there for the entire meeting, but I took the minutes or notes that were taken, as well as I went through the YouTube video, and that's how I put the minutes together. They're not in great detail. They reference each of the resolutions that were considered and action as it was indicated at the meeting. But at any rate, any changes or comments for the
Motion to
minutes of
approve.
the 13th? Say it again, Bob.
Yeah, I make a motion to approve.
Okay, Bob's moved that they be approved. Any second? Okay, if I heard that correctly, that was Keith.
Yep.
Hang on. Bob, Keith. Okay, any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, any dissenting votes? Okay, don't hear any dissents, so we'll consider them approved unanimously. Next is public comments, and I'm looking at the attendees list, and I don't see anything other than ourselves and Josh, so I think we're going to go past public comments if there are no public comments. Just before we go to the unfinished business, although it's not an agenda item, since our last meeting, there was the referendum and the results of the referendum. Anybody have any comments that you wish to make regarding the referendum? We do have a couple of items in the new business in particular that are relevant to the referendum, but any comments that anybody wish to make regarding the referendum? I personally don't have any. Sure.
The only question I would have is who in Ocean Pines is going to take care of updating the bylaws to incorporate the changes so the bylaws on the internet match what was approved? And does our committee need any more involvement?
Okay,
That's a good question.
Okay, this is something I think I can, and myself as the chairman can make a comment back.
You've got mail.
Okay, that wasn't me. To our liaison, asking about that. The answer to responsibility for making sure the records are correct would, I think, in the bylaws, without looking them up, would probably fall to the secretary. Now, how that's done, it could be is a legitimate question. Let me phrase it that way. The referendum a year plus ago on the capital expenditures referendum, the limitation on the amount amendment to the bylaws, that amendment was put in the bylaws and published. Just exactly who did it, I don't know, and we had no participation in it. This is somewhat more extensive amendment to the bylaws by far. The only thing that I can add to that, and I'm going to go back to 2008. I was in fact on the committee at that time, and the committee did do a proofreading of the bylaws draft that was a part of the referendum. And we did the proofreading. There were a couple of typos type things that had to be made, had to be corrected, and there was a formatting issue, and I won't try to go into details. Just how material was presented was uneven in places. Let's put it that way. And we in effect updated the draft, and it went from there and was handled through the staff actually, who all from there got involved. I don't know at that time or from that time, other than this committee did proofread what would become the final published new version of the bylaws. So I consider it appropriate if the committee is in agreement with that, that I send back for the committee communication to our liaison. How is that being handled, and what role, if any, do we have or can play in it? Is that an acceptable or approach to take on this question?
I think so.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's what I will do as soon as possible after this meeting. All right, let's go on to the unfinished business. If you would, Josh, if you're with us now, can you put up the B01 resolution from the book of resolutions? I have my own copy here somewhere, of which I will promptly.
Just a minute.
I've got it here. While we're getting this up and ready, what I wanted to do is perhaps clarify comments that I would have made had I been able to continue with the meeting last time. If you go, Josh, go down to, I think it's let's try the second page, no, third page. Okay, third page is a signature page, and it's we'll stop there. D, legal review. My concern is that we may need to make or should make some changes to this subparagraph. And before I get into that, I believe we can consider ourselves as the responsible party for this resolution. This is the basic book of resolutions resolution. This talks about the book of resolutions, and as far as I'm concerned, we should take the lead in reviewing and proposing amendments. That doesn't mean there's nobody else that can propose amendments at any time. The board of directors or somebody, a committee, another committee, or just an association member can send their own proposed amendment. But my concern came up specifically with regard to M09 and its most recent revision. The board passed a new and amended M09, and I don't have the dates in front of me. They're not necessarily relevant, but it was back in the end of March, April timeframe. I'm not sure now. And it was actually approved and signed And in the book of resolutions, however, the attorney had concerns about the attachment B, and where there are questions for applicants. And he was concerned that it was not clear that the answers to those, the yes or no answers to those questions, the questions themselves were optional. And what the board approved was an addition to that yes or no answering that said that clarified or stated these questions are optional. In fact, if you look at the resolution on the website, that's in fact in red font. That was done after the initial approval by the board, and the subsequent approved amendment has not been signed by the attorney. And I think we want to avoid that kind of thing, and in some manner consider revising legal review, including possibly even putting in there just simply a requirement that the attorney sign when it has been reviewed by the attorney before it's published in the book of resolutions, as well as possibly, I'm just suggesting these things, indicating what resolutions do require review by the attorney, instead of there just simply be recommendations. And that recommendation sentence, that doesn't mean only this committee can recommend. Anybody can recommend. Any member of the board of directors can do that. Somebody in public comments can do that. Email to the board, whatever. At any rate, the actual requirements of a legal review and how that is documented to make it be on the resolution, and whether or not there should be specific resolutions designated for legal review. And they would be such things as M06, that's the elections and elections and referendums. M09, that's search committee or search process may be a better term. And there may be others as well. Anyway, that's up for discussion. This is why my monologue here is why I held back on sending anything to our liaison regarding review of this resolution. And in particular, I think we can take the lead in proposing amendments to this resolution without there being a charging document going to the board to review it. We would send. I think it's entirely within our purview to make those kinds of amendments. What kind? Make amendments ourselves, and that suffices for them being called upon to review the resolution as well. Okay, that's enough for me. I'm open. Let's go on with this discussion.
You said a lot.
I know, and I try to avoid that, and sometimes I don't get there from here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it is really difficult to go through all the resolutions and try to determine which ones require legal review, because there could be circumstances where you want to change something that should be in the realm of the committee that should require a legal review when normally most changes don't. So I'm not quite sure how you can identify by resolution, other than the ones that are obvious. I agree with you. The M09 is probably the most logical one in that group that should be included there.
I apologize, I got here late. Can you tell me where we are, what I'm looking at right now?
We're at agenda item B01 under the first unfinished business item.
Okay, thank you.
Thought maybe you're out shopping for donuts.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'm never gonna do that again. And what is the issue that we are dealing with? It is,
Okay, I'll give you the 30-second version of what took me probably 5 minutes to say.
no. I mean, I'm just looking at lowercase c, lowercase d, number 5, and then the effective date. I mean, there's nothing here that would shock me. I don't see that there's an issue here.
Okay, D is the
D.
where I have the concern.
Okay,
What I pointed out as a concern that I have had, excuse me, M09 was revised recently. The date, it's been in the last month and a half or so, and actually signed and put in the book of resolutions. But the attorney had concerns about the questions on the attachment B as to whether it was clear that the yes or no answer questions, it's on the first page of attachment B.
right.
The concern was that it was not clear that those questions were optional. And I might want to add at this point in time, it may not be optional now, but that's a separate subject coming up later. But anyway, so the board then approved a change that added in there, and if you look at the copy of the resolution in the book of resolutions on the website, there is a red font indication that these, and it's not the exact words, these questions are optional. Okay,
Yeah.
that was again approved later by the board, and then added to, or that version was now placed on the book of resolutions. And the amendment, or not the amendment, the resolution has not been signed by the attorney. I don't think we want that kind of a situation to occur again. That raises the issue of the process of legal review, how it's to be designated before it gets into the book of resolutions. The secondary part is that is should we consider specifically designating resolutions which must be given legal review? And before if I haven't said this at the beginning of my more than 30 seconds, I consider it appropriate for us to propose, for us to take responsibility of this resolution, make our own review, and draft, if necessary, amendment, if appropriate, amendments, and send it to the board for its consideration. And that the consideration of amendments from us would be in and of itself a review by the board. It's taken much too long a time in discussing why this is on the agenda, and I want to kind of stop now. And Bob's already commented about not necessarily not making it. It may be difficult to list resolutions for legal review, and then not being able to predict or accommodate situations that would arise with other resolutions. It would be appropriate to have legal review. Anyway, I want to stop there. Let me ask a question. Do we think that there is a need to amplify what's in D with how a legal review process is to be accomplished, in particular, the attorneys signing it before or after the board's acted on, however that may,
Can I just ask a question on that?
Sure.
In light of what I've read on, I sort of hate to do this, social media, concern that many members of the association have with our legal costs. If we were to take that second sentence and say the Bylaws and Resolutions Advisory Committee may recommend that the advice of counsel be obtained prior to board action on a resolution, and I would add, or amendments thereto. Would that be sufficient to relieve the concern that the board takes these actions and then we end up going to court? In other words, if you read what's we're talking about, they're bothered by all of our legal expenses. I don't know what our legal expenses are. I don't know what our contract is with the law firm. But what I'm driving at is if the Bylaws Committee were to say to the board, need to check with counsel as to the resolution and any amendments to that resolution. It would seem to me at that point, the board is sort of on notice as saying, you know, let's kick this over to our attorney and address the question of whether or not we're facing increased or decreased legal exposure. And I don't know that we have to make it mandatory. It would just seem to me if our committee were to say, you should do this, I would think the board would do it. Or am I missing something?
My concern would be that if it does go to legal review and they review it, they should sign off on it. So we have lawyers that sign for something we paid for.
Oh, I agree. I don't, I mean, I'm looking,
That's not happening evidently.
well, I'm looking at the M09 and you're right, that is not signed off on.
Right.
And that, but that's a matter of, I mean, it seems to me that's a matter of practice and procedure. And the secretary of the committee, I'm sorry, let me rephrase, secretary of the board, I would think, is the one who would have that obligation. Once the, you know, in other words, it goes through a series of steps. I think I'm correct. You know, we pass it on to the board acts. And when legal review is complete, whether it's before the board acts or after the board acts, you know, there has to be a sign off. I mean, it's there for a reason, right?
Yeah, because if the board agrees to something and agrees it should be sent over for legal review, then it shouldn't be signed off by the board until the legal review is completed, because it may raise more questions.
Correct.
And maybe the committee should be called back to take a look at what's in there and why they're recommending that.
Yeah. Are you suggesting that our committee gets a second bite of the apple?
Well, if it radically changes, I mean, if the board agrees with what we send over and the lawyer makes a radical change, should the committee not get a second opportunity to see if we missed something?
Or if, or is that applying to also then, if it's changed dramatically, then are we doing something wrong as a committee that we didn't catch something or didn't, or are we going to take it as a learning way that, okay, legally we need to word things such and such way and take it as something that we can now be aware of and make sure that when we're doing all of our practices here as a committee that we're doing it correctly. Because I think that would, it kind of defeats the purpose of having the committee, doesn't it? If something gets changed so dramatically because council says this is not correct, wouldn't you want to inform the committee also, not just your board of directors, why the council said something? You know, if it's so dramatically different than what we all have thought.
Well, I'm just thinking, yeah, I think Laura and Bob are sort of saying the same thing.
Right.
And I would, the way I would look at it would be, I agree with Bob's point, which is legal review has to occur prior to board action. I don't think that's in disagreement. But if council were to radically change whatever it is we send up to the board, then what our action is, for lack of a better term, would sort of be null and void. I mean, we're now trying to compare apples to oranges, and we have to get back to either apples or to oranges, but we can't sit there and deal with both. So I would think both Laura and Bob are right. If council engages in significant revision, then that should go back to the committee for second review. And the problem you run into is at some point it becomes a tennis match. The ball bounces back and forth and nothing gets done. But
I'm not necessarily saying that we would have to be part of another review, other than I feel like when we as committee say recommend to the board that council is sought on this, to make sure the wording is correct or whatever, that we never hear as a committee the final result back. Not until after a board meeting has occurred and they have already now passed everything. Why? I would think in a way to me, it's more of just a courtesy thing that you should also inform the committee that worked on it why it was changed, why, this wording is better than that wording. I feel like we never have closure on some of the stuff then. Does that make sense? I mean, and if it was something that was so drastically changed that council is saying, no, you guys are all off on this, wouldn't it be helpful to at least let us know the results of what council said prior to the board making their final approval on something, so that we're all still working together?
Well, the way you could, and I don't know that this is doable, maybe Jim has a thought on this, but the way you could short circuit that whole process would be for the committee to request on a given resolution or amendment to resolution that council be allowed to participate in our committee deliberation, so that council understands what it is we're looking at. Council can then explain why it might fly and not fly, and then you sort of avoid potentially sort of the ping pong situation. I mean,
and the whole purpose for legal review is to try to eliminate, where possible and practical, lawsuits.
Yeah. Right. So the sooner you get to that point, the better off you are. No, I would think so.
I'm not sure I know how to the practicality of establishing a policy, I'm going to put it that way, of putting this committee back in the loop when council has some, I'm going to call, significant difference from what came to the council for review. That kind of, it would have to go, in general, it would go from the board of directors to the council and then back to the council, back to the board of directors.
Right.
And telling the board, you got to involve this committee or any other committee that is involved in the resolution, for that matter. It could be proposals from the elections committee, which we have reviewed, but the elections committee initiated the proposals. But I have difficulty figuring out how we would and put in there something like being not injected, but put back in the process after a council's review. Let me kind of not skip everything that's been discussed, but maybe it's the second sentence that needs to be looked at. Well, it's being looked at, let's put it that way. And Steve made I think something of an addition to it, but the Bylaws and Resolutions Advisory Committee is not the source of making, not the only source of making a recommendation. And really that the decision on going to the council would be is a board decision, and maybe that sentence ought to be revised in some manner that to the effect of when council is going to seek advice of when the board, excuse me, the board is going to seek advice of council. It should be done before approval by the board and after approval or with approval by the board. The council signature should be on the released resolution. And let me just add one comment beyond that. The first sentence is a not a variation. It effectively changed the practice that existed at the time this resolution was initially written, which was back in about 2008 or 9, as a matter of fact. Up until that point in time, the legal counsel was signing every resolution. I think if you go to the admin building, to the I'll call it the executive secretary's office, as presumably there still is the old book of resolutions, you find the signature of then council on every resolution, no matter what it was. This one state is from the time of this original B01 that it stated that such signature by council is not required. Anyway, back to the second sentence. Would we be headed in the direction of getting the bylaws and resolutions advisory recommendation out of that? So we're in place that responsibility on the board, and how that's accomplished and must be documented in the final resolution, the final release of the resolution.
Well, I have a question. Why does this sentence specify our committee? In other words, can't any committee recommend to the board on an issue to get advice of council? I mean, why is this just a bylaws and resolutions committee thing?
I'm going back in ancient history, which obviously can be wrong. I think I can say I think I can say reasonably authoritatively, since many of the words in here are mine from the original resolution, it was not intended that the bylaws and resolution advisory committee be the sole source of recommendations. It was intended that there be a place in this that a recommendation can be made, but it would have been better said that the bylaws and resolutions committee may recommend, as well as, and fill in a blank, as well as recommend to the board that council be that advice of council be obtained. But it you know, again, I'm going by words that I wrote and trying to remember what the intention was, and that's.
I got you.
To a certain extent.
Would it be appropriate if it said something like, the board may receive recommendations from advisory groups, from Ocean Pines advisory committees, regarding receiving advice of council prior to action on resolutions? In other words, is there any value in making this more generic and just saying that the board can accept or entertain recommendations for council review?
Well, why don't you just say any advisory committee any resolution forwarded to the board by the committee of jurisdiction may include a recommendation that advice of council be obtained. That way any committee could do it.
Yeah.
whether it's the elections committee or the search committee or whoever, and we're not cut out. We could do it also. So any committee recommending resolution or amendments thereto can seek advice, would recommend that the board seek advice of council, and then Jim's language about, and I forget exactly how you worded it, Jim, but getting his signature on it prior to final board action would suffice. My only suggestion is, because the first sentence talks about proposed resolutions and amendments thereto, in the sentence where you talk about resolution, you have to include or amendments thereto. Let's make the two consistent.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because I think we're probably going a little too far into the weeds, because if you look at it, the board of directors is responsible. It's up to them to decide if they want a legal review. It's up to them to decide what they want to pass or not pass. But I do think that if we are paying for a legal review, the lawyers should sign off on it.
Yeah, that's the other way of doing it.
That's the only thing that
Yeah.
I see missing.
So that's a good point. And so that really is my other question, is why is the sentence here at all? That
You're
second,
talking about the
why is it
second
there at all?
It's a board, really. We could recommend to the board, but that shouldn't be in there as a resolution. It's, if we think it has a legal impact or possibility of litigation, any committee could recommend it. But it's up to the board to decide whether they want to pursue it or not. So it rests with the 7 members of the board of directors.
Well, we're kind of to the point where I have a paragraph D right now.
Yeah.
But
Well,
Jim,
yeah,
is the issue whether or not is the bottom line issue to ensure that any resolution that's entered into the book of resolutions, either in its original form or as amended, has a signature of council when council performs legal review. Is that really where we want to get to? Is that the bottom line?
Hey, Steve, would you say that again?
That's okay. Yeah. I'm sort of picking up on Bob's point, which is really it's the board's decision whether to get legal review.
Right.
So my question then is, from your earlier explanation, and again, I apologize for bumping in late, but is the real issue that we want to get to ensure that when the resolution or the amended resolution, whichever, is entered into the book of resolutions and it has been subject to legal review, that council has signed off? Is that the bottom line that we want to get to?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
I think so.
Maybe what you just said, maybe different words perhaps should replace everything in D.
Yeah. If you're going to spend the money for a legal review, you should have a signature.
Right. And so the first sentence, I think, is okay. The legal review of proposed resolution is not required before adoption by the board of directors. Second sentence would be something along the lines of, when the board seeks legal review of any resolution or amendment thereto, council must affirm by signature his action prior to final board action and prior to being entered into the book of resolutions.
Yes.
yeah,
So,
I like that.
So if
I
the
think
going to be legal counsel, then council has to sign off, and then prior to final board action, and then it has to be it would be duly noted within the book of resolutions.
Okay, that sounds like a good suggestion to me.
Okay.
And any,
In other words, it's not required, but if you're going to do it, then get a signature.
Right.
that's
Right.
basically, yeah.
Prior to final board action. That's really all you
Right.
can make sure of.
Okay, let me make this suggestion. Rather than try to sit down and actually write out the words right now, this would go, this would be a proposed draft to the board of directors. Let me review this. Frankly, I would go back and look at the video and take those words and put them in, put what we talked about, put it into a draft revision of this paragraph D. It would be the entire resolution. And before it gets sent to the board as a draft, I would also have it reviewed by the committee. I think it's appropriate that we can do that offline without violating open meeting requirements. What we're doing is confirming that, yeah, this is what we decided to do and would appear as such in the minutes anyway. That's my proposal. I can take what we've talked about and effectively decided on, put it in a draft amendment to be submitted to the board, have it looked at, and if it meets everybody's approval, then it would go to the board as a draft amendment to a resolution. Is that an acceptable process?
Yes.
Good for me,
That's
yes.
good.
Okay.
Concur.
Next
All right,
agenda.
then. We'll check. I really hope we can get the rest of the way through the agenda. We'll see here. Hopefully the rest of them won't take that long. The next unfinished item is M06, and that's another one where I didn't proceed with anything to our liaison. Reason why is that there is, in fact, I'm not sure how well known it is, consideration being given to this coming election, the process that we're literally in right now, to be conducted by electronic means. And in so doing, there must be some documentation of how that's going to be done. I know that under consideration, or when I say under consideration, not necessarily formally at the board, but under consideration is another attachment to M06, excuse me, that would my throat is rather dry, so hopefully I can keep talking. Maybe it's good that I don't. There is, in fact, consideration or available for consideration another attachment to M06, which would describe or document the process of electronic voting. That, if in fact it goes forward, is going to be the item or the process of attention necessarily between now and the election itself. And a review of other parts of the M06 can be deferred, let me put it that way. Among the items that I think may have been talked about one way or another is the duplicate vote process, where now there's a scanning so that you have in the data what's come in and whether or not something else another ballot has come in from the same address. That's not described in M06. It would be in attachment A, but it's not currently described. Okay, the fact that it's not, well, we're too far into this election process to change that. Let's put it there to update that part of the resolution. Another one that came from the Elections Committee itself is the additional candidates provision. Said that the additional candidate applications can come in by, I think it's the third Friday of June. They're concerned that that's too late in the process for them to be able to do everything that has to be done to do the orderly preparation of election materials as should be done. Well, it's not an item for this year. We've got more than two candidates for the three positions. We got 6 candidates, which is one more than the minimum. And there are other considerations that can be brought into place. There was an issue, again, this is social media issues perhaps, dealing with open meetings and the muting of the meeting during the count process. There's another maybe concern here and there that the facility in which the counting was done was not really appropriate for the number of people required and the business that had to be done. Those are items that may or may not be appropriate to be considered by this committee or any other committee for that matter. But anyway, these are items I think that of necessity in some part, and as a practical matter and others, as far as whether they're applicable this time or not, can be delayed until after the election. And in fact, the election committee is required to submit a 30-day report, meaning 30 days after the election, on the election process. My suggestion is we hold on to our comments on this and wait until at least the election is over, and be prepared to make a submittal to the committee and to the board our thoughts on M06. Okay, any comments on that? Effectively, I'm recommending we defer doing anything on this as a practical matter. If electronic voting is going to go forward, the process of getting that in place and actually doing it is going to take the priority, and other areas are not necessarily important. And it's kind of too late to do anything about it with this election anyway.
It's fine by me.
What I'm recommending is we make sure we get together what we think needs to be considered regarding M06 and be prepared no later than right after the election to forward it to perhaps the board and to the elections committee itself.
Well, so my comment on that would be, I don't know what would need to be put into a resolution about electronic voting. I don't know enough about it. I don't, if it's a kind of system where there's no decisions to be made, you press a button and it either works or it doesn't, that's less stuff, right, that goes in a resolution. If there's a whole bunch of decisions that need to be made and there's got to be guidance established for how those decisions are made, then that's more content, right? Maybe would it be appropriate if, I agree with you to defer this, but maybe it's appropriate for us to say, if we're going to go down this path, this resolution is going to have to be updated. And we, the bylaws and advisory committee, are going to need some input from the election committee on this system and how it works. And, maybe our task is to generate some questions to send to the elections committee that would then help us to understand what would even go in the resolution regarding electronic voting. Over.
Okay, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt, Keith.
No, I'm done.
Okay. Whether I'm stepping out of line or not, I'll apologize to whomever I'm stepping out of line with. There is in draft form an attachment D to this resolution that deals with electronic voting. I have not only seen it, I made comments to it and was requested to make comments, and I did make comments. I know that draft has gone to not the entire board, but to 2 members of the board of directors who are in a position of being specifically interested in documenting how we would do electronic voting. Let's put it that way. I do not know if it's gone to the board. It's my understanding. Again, I apologize if I'm stepping out of line to whomever I'm stepping out of line with. It's my understanding that if we are going to go to electronic voting for this for this election, the documentation, which at this case or at this point in time would be an amendment to M06, an attachment added to M06. It has to be before the board. It has to be before the board at a regular meeting. The next regular meeting is another approximately 2 weeks from now. And it would require a second meeting after that, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a regular meeting, to approve it and have it in place for be able to do the election in that manner. So that has happened. Let's put it that way. There is a draft from the elections committee. Let me put it that way. It's make sure it's understood that way, which I have seen and which I was asked for make comments to, and which I did. And it didn't, in turn, went to what I'll call appropriate members of the board, not the entire board. What has happened with it after that, I don't know. It's my understanding, though, that if we are going to go to electronic voting, it would necessitate an amendment to M06, most probably in the format of an attachment D to the resolution at the next regular meeting, and then there would have to be a subsequent meeting, which does not have to be a regular meeting. It could be literally a special meeting following the regular meeting. But it would be through the amendment process as a resolution. Our participation as a committee in reviewing that would have to be determined by the board. Yes, we should be, this committee should have an opportunity to look at it. I don't think there's any question of that.
So
Anyway,
that's my question. That's my question then. So the elections committee has already drafted up something about this, about electronic voting, but didn't feel the need to include us as a committee before sending it to the board for consideration. They only asked for your input because as committee chair of the bylaws committee, or just as an individual who's very, very knowledgeable about bylaws and all that stuff. More of like a consultant kind of ask.
I think consulting me was a word that was used. So you call me consultant if you want to.
I would think of all the committees, elections would want to have us work with them to make sure that everything is going to be aligned right, to save everybody the trouble of getting something approved by the directors. But then our job has always been to make sure things are worded consistently, that it matches all these other different sections, blah, 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 blah. And that sounds like we'd be the last point of contact versus why wouldn't it have been a joint why wouldn't the elections committee want to say we consulted the bylaws and resolutions committee as well before presenting it to the directors? But maybe that's a moot point and I'm overstepping, but sometimes I just think we create too many paths and we're making more work for everybody in the long run, so I don't know. That's my piece. Sorry.
I'm going to abstain from this discussion.
Well, I'll make a couple of comments. The elections committee and the bylaws and resolutions committee have worked together in at least one specific circumstances 2 or 3 years more, probably 2 or 3, 4 years now. I don't remember exactly when. The issue of the counting of ballots and the manner in which they were counted had been when I say manner, I'm talking about open meeting, closed meeting manner, had been an issue for a period of time. And I think it can be said that the elections committee and the bylaws and resolutions committee both had an interest in establishing the requirement that the count of the ballots had to be conducted in an open meeting manner. And I don't want to, quote, relitigate
Mhm.
the issue itself. I don't think there's any, but, you know, I don't think there was any question that the committee counting of the ballots was a committee action, and as such would have to be an open meeting unless there was an exception can be identified. And as far as I'm concerned, there was no possibility of an exception, and that's a personal view. But both committees had an interest in bringing about a change to the resolution in which the counting was done in an open meeting manner. And in that particular issue and in bringing about that amendment to M06 was effectively a joint effort by both committees to bring that about, in our best influence to bring that about, and to the necessary, it may have been necessary at that time, to the necessary extent that persuasion had to be applied, and we applied it as both committees. That incident, that circumstance is one in which the two committees did in fact work together. And there was also another, not necessarily committee, but in M01, the revisions, most recent revisions to M01 was direct work with the primary or actual director sponsor of that resolution. He actually met with the committee met with him. He joined one of our regular meetings. You know, yeah, I've had a personal interest in, not necessarily in electronic voting, but the way that electronic voting can be brought about. We've chosen to, not we, the committee has chosen to go with an amendment to M06. I'm not sure that that's really necessary under the Homeowners Association Act, and I've expressed that, but that's neither here nor there. And I've expressed that more than 2 years ago before the committee. There's nothing holding you back to go for electronic voting, despite the fact that the bylaws clearly they almost clearly state that voting is by mail-in ballot. And we're going to violate the bylaws. Not going to violate them. We're going to bypass the bylaws with authorization from the Homeowners Association Act if we just simply add an attachment for electronic voting. And I've been a part of that kind of discussion, so that's one reason why I could personally have been asked to comment. But as far as looking at any proposal that does make it to the board, obviously there's going to be short-term fuse to this, and that's one of the reasons why it's been handled in an expedited manner, if I can put it that way. It's not something that can wait for routine thinking and thought process and add through comments before it gets to the board action level. That may be subject to a different opinion. I know that. Anyway, that's enough. I think I've said enough on that. But that's the situation. There's two situations we have here. One is I think we need to defer, and Keith has indicated he agrees with it, deferring. Another is what may be ahead of us. Right now, we don't know what may be ahead of us, and it's unlikely that we will know until whatever the meeting materials come out regarding the next the board meeting, what the board meeting is going to consider, whether it's going to consider any changes in the election coming up. Then maybe I haven't looked at the calendar. I always looked at the committee calendar the day after a committee has met that I'm interested in. I don't know the next meeting of the I'd have to look at it. Well, we could do it right away if we wanted to. I don't want to be delaying this, but let me hopefully not delay this meeting too much. Come on. Here we go. Uh-oh. I don't want to do that. All right, in July, the Elections Committee already met. And well, it's not going to meet again until the 1st of July, according to this calendar. I don't see anything before the 1st of July, which would be effectively probably after any action on the on any proposal to amend M06. Anyway, that's enough comment on me. I can't add anything more to where the next election process stands. Let's put it that way.
I think the only logical thing is defer it. If they want our involvement, you're going to have to call a special meeting because there's not going to be enough time to look at it before then.
I agree.
And just move on to the next subject.
Okay, are we ready to go to new business? We're down to a little less than an hour for the rest of this meeting on our schedule. I know we can continue on, but
How much time do you have for resolutions?
we can move this pretty fast, or at least in some degree, if we continue now with new business. Josh,
Okay.
can you put new business back up there?
What's the
No.
new business attachment?
No, the agenda, I'm sorry.
Yep, you got it.
Okay, next item is the new businesses search committee. This simply is in regard to the bylaws amendment, or amended bylaws. There are a number of things that in the M09 that are affected. Some of them are not particularly earth-shaking, let's put it that way. My recommendation is that this goes to the board in a charging document. And the charging document can simply point out that search committee activities are affected by the recent bylaws amendments, and we can point out some just for record purposes. One is that the search committee can be delayed until March 1st to be amended. At the M09 says February 1st. There are paragraph 8, I guess it is, responsibilities of secretary. It lists various responsibilities of the secretary, including eligibility requirements. Now, does that need to be revised in any manner? Because there's significant changes in the eligibility requirements. Now, that may not need change simply because it refers to a paragraph or section in the, it refers to sections in the bylaws, and those sections regarding eligibility may not be changed. But again, that needs to be looked at, whether that current paragraph needs to be revised. That's another area in particular that can be pointed out if necessary in a charging document. Then we got minor, to a degree, hot button issues. The list of eligible candidates, when it's been submitted to the election committee, goes to the association for release to the public, and it just says the list of eligible candidates. What we want to put in there in alphabetical order to take account to some controversy that came out. And then there is the attachment B itself, the application form, and as to whether or not, as a result of the bylaws amendment, does that application form need to be in some manner modified? In particular, the question, yes or no questions, are they now optional or are they mandatory to be answered? And that kind of thing can be put in a charging document, as well as who's got the responsibility for the review and update of the resolution itself. Originally, that resolution was written by this committee. And it's been amended, in particular by input from the then secretary at the time, the secretary at the time. There's been a couple of amendments before this most recent one or two amendments, I'm not sure which. But the basic resolution was initially from this committee. Now, who should have that responsibility? My personal opinion should be the search committee. But we can put this kind of thing in a charging document for review and send it to the board. Again, I've overstepped how long I want to talk by about 3 or 4 minutes. So yeah, comments on where we are on M09. In M09, a charging document. It's got to go off.
I agree with that. I think there's a lot of questions involved there that we need to take a look at. So I agree that we need to ask the board for a charging document to go look at those and make sure that all those questions can be answered.
Well, what I would do is put it in a charging document from this committee to the board with the kind of items that I just mentioned.
Oh, looking for answers from them?
Well, the point is the document has to, the resolution must be reviewed. Now, the question is who's going to do the review?
Oh, I got you.
A question is good. And here are some of the reasons why it has to be reviewed. Now, you also got to decide who's going to do the review.
Nope, I'm with you. I support that.
Yep.
Okay.
And you agreed, Jim, that anything that goes to the board, we review first before we make any recommendations or anything. So this case stands out real clear to do that.
Yeah, that basically,
Yeah.
If I can put it this way, what I just rattled through would be our review. It wouldn't necessarily be a complete review, but
No.
reasons why it should be reviewed.
Right. Yes.
And we're
Agreed.
not the ones that we don't do the reviews.
Is there any reason why you wouldn't do it as a charging document to the board? I mean, I think.
No, there's no reason why not. I agree.
Yeah.
It should be.
Okay.
Do it.
Okay, any other comment on this? All right, what I will do is prepare a charging document. I'll send it around before we send it out. So everybody, again, has to confirm what we agreed upon in the meeting is what goes out. Well, let's move on to the standalone. Steve, I didn't get a chance to talk to you about this. This is on here in particular because of some communication between Steve and I, and the fact that the meaning of a standalone referendum is not defined anywhere, and that should be as a matter of concern. And Steve, I apologize for not having asked you to comment on this in advance and your thinking as to why you brought this up to me in a conversation.
Right, and I am a little bit not prepared for that, but that, I mean, basically, your description is correct. What strikes me as a practice, and hold on.
Fair show.
Sound of freedom.
There you go.
The weather is so nice. I'm sitting on my back deck, and of course, the air show is practicing. So I apologize.
Oh, there you go.
At any rate, what's abundantly clear is everyone seems to be able to know what a standalone, what they mean by a standalone referendum, which is basically something that is sent out Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, my recollection is it's something that is sent out not accompanying the ballot for the board elections. More often than not, that would be something that would be proffered by a member through the board to be considered by the full membership. That's not always the case, but more often than not, that would be the case. But nowhere is it defined. That raised, as I recall, during the period shortly after the votes were counted and the results were announced from the bylaws changes, everyone started to get a little fuss and feathers about that no one, what do we mean by a standalone? So my emails to Jim back and forth were basically, should we have something ready to move forward with to define what a standalone referendum is, and then if we decide to do that, what's the appropriate vehicle? I mean, what do we attach it to? And that's about as far as we got with that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I agree. I think my addition to that is that do we want to send be an email would be my suggestion to our liaison, in which we recognize that there is no definition, that there may have been some, or there has been some social media comment on what's a standalone referendum, and ask if we should be considering or preparing anything for consideration by the board regarding defining how, where, when, not when, but how and where to define standalone referendum. Should this committee be prepared to, or actually prepare something? That would be question to the liaison. That's my suggestion with regard to this issue of the fact that there is no definition of standalone referendum.
Well, question would be, how often do referendums go out? In the time I've lived here, there's only been a few ever sent out. And if you're going to send a referendum out and it's going to be standalone, why don't you define it when you send a referendum out? This is a standalone referendum and requires X% of voters for approval. And just include that as part of the package, because people are going to forget what a standalone is, whether you define it or not now. But if you get a resolution and it clearly states this is a standalone resolution and requires X% of voters, that'd probably be the best way of getting the information out.
Yeah, I think that's true, Bob. Here, as I recall, the what I would politely refer to as the social media commentary about this.
Okay.
The feeling was that the board would be able to address the matter by having referenda that they want to see enacted tied shoot at the time that the elections are taking place, which the assumption being the percentage would be high enough that you would meet the 40% threshold, and then excuse me, and then all the other referenda that the board doesn't want to see addressed would come out as standalone, and they'd be dying to hit any place around 30%. In which case, if they don't get the 40%, it would never be enacted, no matter how big a number they got in support or opposed. I mean, think about for a second the referenda. I guess it was about a year or so ago about the $1 million for the board action. That was a standalone referendum. My recollection is it made the 40% number, if I remember correctly, but the board clearly was not in favor of it, which led to a court case and all this other stuff. So the commentary that was going on was the board will play games on this. I mean, that's the short description, but that's what they were saying.
Well, maybe there should be something in the resolution section when a resolution is submitted by other than the board, that if it's going to be standalone, it has to include the documentation that clearly states it's standalone and requires a higher percentage. Because I've heard the same thing from a lot of people. The board is the board, and they get the right to do what they want to do. We elect them. So if they decide anything they want to send out goes out with the general election, that's fine. But if there's a standalone that they're not in favor of, there should be some way that the owners are at least told that it is a standalone and requires a threshold percentage of X.
Yeah, right. I think that would be not a bad idea. But if I, and Keith, bear with me 1 second. My recollection is that when we considered this issue, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we considered this issue as it related to the amendments to the bylaws, we didn't make the distinction between standalone and other referenda. And when the board completed their work, they were the ones who stuck in the standalone language.
I agree with that. So I was the one that initially drafted it, and I drafted it with the standalone referendum language in it. But then in our discussion with the board, and I think Steve was the one that brought it up, he said, why do we want to differentiate? And there really was no good reason to differentiate. And the reason that I said standalone is because historically, the elections for the board have produced those kinds of participation numbers. So in my mind, it wasn't necessary to articulate that because we were already getting that kind of turnout. So, but the reality of it is that we really didn't need to specify it being a standalone because that participation rate, either we were getting it already via the board of directors elections, or we desired that with the standalone referendum. So I thought we had actually taken out that language, and I was kind of surprised when I got the booklet to see that it was back in there.
I think that's right.
Yeah, it changed. There's no doubt about it. And I, not the social media, but enough people that I talked to brought up the same issue. And again, we elect the board. So if we disagree with what the board's doing, you get a chance to replace them.
And I wonder, because some of these resolutions were tweaked, language, administratively, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering if that was an administrative thing and not deliberate, that wording was put back in there. I don't recall the board specifically discussing that.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if it just somehow in the process of tweaking all these and getting them ready for publication, that it got put back in inadvertently, not realizing we deliberately took it out.
So maybe having too many copies floating around when they went to do the final draft, they didn't, like you said, didn't realize we had it, yes, but then we took it out and they put it back in accidentally.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think it was intentional either, but it happened.
Could we have prevented that? Is there, I guess, once it goes to the board, is there any reason once they update things to have it come back to us just for a final quick view to say, hey, wait a minute, did you, we're not recommending that language anymore. Would there have been any way to catch that before it went out into all the booklets and everything like that?
My personal opinion is I started seeing it get muddled when, so we have a really good board liaison right now, Colette. She's really good. And she goes to a lot of trouble to take notes during our meetings to make sure that she understands what we're talking about, kind of the position that we're taking. She's really good at that. But I think what happened is she started relying on her notes for part of it, instead of waiting to get the official feedback from us. And then I think you had basically two different discussions going on. One set of discussion was relative to notes, and another discussion potentially relative to what officially was presented by this committee. And I think maybe there was some confusion inadvertently that
Right.
got injected at that point, because people were trying hard to make sure, there was nothing nefarious going on. It was just people trying hard to make sure everything got captured, was worked on. And I suspect maybe that reason, and then there were some other people on the board that had their own
Ideas, yeah.
versions, right, of what they wanted. So they had write-ups that they
Right.
were addressing. And so it seemed to me that at one point you had like 4 different versions of
Right.
resolutions being passed around and discussed. And I sort of lost track, quite frankly, of a couple of them at
Right.
one point. And then when we got the booklet, I specifically read through it, and there were just a few things in there that surprised me, because they were not the way we presented them. And I did not recall them specifically being discussed in that manner. So
Right.
I think a lot of people were trying really hard because there was so much work going on, and maybe we just lost the focus somehow.
Maybe because there was 28 different things that were being put out there, that all of the conversations and, like you said, notes, I could very easily, make mistakes too. But yeah.
But I think where we are at this point is, I mean, the real question is whether or not we need to come up with a definition or not. I mean, the bylaws change is done. We're not going to get that
Right.
readdressed. So just to be on the safe side, the question, and I think Jim is right, an email to Colette saying, we've discussed this. We know there's no definition anywhere. Should we be looking to be charged with the requirement to A, come up with a definition, and B, I guess, find an appropriate vehicle to attach it to, or maybe even a standalone resolution. I don't know. I'll leave that to somebody else. But
Well, so that's my question.
Yeah.
Does the definition go into the bylaws? And if so, does that mean another vote? Because if that were the case, if by defining it, we had to go back to another vote,
yeah,
then my recommendation would be don't define it, remove it.
Right.
Now, if we can document it somehow without a vote, and I don't know that that's the case, Jim probably knows, some place where we had definitions that we could just simply define what was in the bylaws, then I guess that would be fine. But if we get put into a position where we literally got to go back to the people and go, oh, by the way, we got to stick this definition in there, then my recommendation would be to remove the wording altogether.
Well, you can't take the word out because it's already approved in the bylaws standalone. So you can't check it out. It's not, you're
Right,
living
you
with
can
it.
amend it out, yeah. They're not to, I think we've got to
Put
a
a
point
footnote
where,
in, maybe.
I think we've got to a point where our communication to our liaison regarding
Right.
what we should be doing, if anything, is where we at now. As far as some other place for a definition, I could in the communication to the liaison, I could perhaps suggest this, but there is a resolution on petitions, which leads to referendums, or could lead to a referendum. That resolution could be significantly expanded to include provisions regarding referendums themselves, and in there a definition, for example, of standalone. But that's, I'd want to think twice about suggesting something like that. I think the basic thing we have here is I need to send to the liaison that there is no definition, and should this committee be preparing something or be prepared for submitting something regarding a definition of standalone. Effectively, we're wait for direction from the board, either yes, no, or we're not going to do anything.
I agree.
Do we all understand that to be the direction on this thing?
I
Okay,
agree.
Good for me.
was there another comment? I don't want to cut anybody off. Okay. Uh, The next item on the agenda is F04. Now we're finally getting into something that is more or less new business. In the, okay, this was going back to the, I'll call it memo form dated May 3rd, in which each of the resolutions due for review were listed with some comments. F04 is the delinquency resolution. The process of handling annual charge delinquencies. Now, in that resolution, okay, Josh is ahead of me here. He's got it up there already. Josh, go all the way to the, I guess it'd be the next page, probably the bottom of the next page. Whoops. Up, okay, up. By March 1st, there you go, right in the middle. This indicates that there has to be a review meeting between certain members of the association to review the process and to determine the effectiveness of the current assessment collection strategy and determine what, if any, further actions should be taken. And there's a report that goes to the board on that. That report effectively includes a review of the resolution where it says determine the effectiveness of the association's process and if any, what further action should be taken. That would include any amendment to this resolution. So basically, what is necessary is that report. And in the past, what we've had to do is ask for that report and see if in there there's any expression of not dissatisfaction, but a determination of something better or something should be done to better the effectiveness of the process, which would necessarily involve this resolution. So my proposal on this is simply ask the liaison to please get that report so that a determination can be made as to the effectiveness of this resolution, or whether this resolution has been reviewed, is adequate for its purposes. I don't know that needs to be a charging document, because we're not actually, we're just asking for a report that should already exist.
Am I wrong, or is subparagraphs, I'm guessing 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 all apply to someone who is delinquent, a homeowner who's delinquent in their assessments?
Right,
I mean,
that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, so why, I'm just curious, off the beaten path here. Why would we then, at the end of sub 6, require some sort of report be done when everything preceding it talks about a separate action against a discrete homeowner? I mean, one seems to be, a policy issue, and the other one seems to be an enforcement issue. I don't quite see why they're all squashed together.
6 used to say that it had to be a review of outstanding delinquencies. And that was changed to simply a review of the process, and delinquencies would be handled individually. There's been from the beginning a determination that the delinquency process should be reviewed annually to determine whether it is effective. And somebody could question the letter being sent out. Is that really effective? That's neither here nor there for what we're talking about. But again, 6 used to read that the review was supposed to be of every delinquency and action to be taken or recommended to be taken on each delinquency. That was changed to simply be a review of the process, how well the process was working. But the point for our purposes is that review itself it carries with it a determination of whether F04 is in fact an effective resolution.
Well, I certainly have no problem with trying to track down whatever the report is that's due. That part makes eminent good sense, but organizationally, I don't see where it fits in. That's all but that's fine.
Well, we need to have the resolution reviewed. It'd be a simple act, and maybe this is the right way to do it. Just say, send a charging document out that says F04 is overdue for review, please review. And perhaps make a note that there's no evidence yet that the report due by May 1st has been done. Or the meeting has not been taken, and there should be a report. An update should be provided to the board of directors. Okay, what's the update? That can be added to it, but a simple request for review is entirely not adequate, entirely appropriate.
I agree.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, well, then we'll put it down. A charging document will go out. Hang on a second. Let me get my copy of the resolution.
It's kind of like the issue, Jim, of the search committee, right? Where we have a requirement that the board would establish a search committee, and then for a couple of years, we didn't actually have a search committee. And it was kind of the same situation, right? Where we had a requirement for something to be done that wasn't getting done. And so the question was, do we really need this to be here? So this is sort of similar to that.
Yeah, well, I believe, again, my memory is not something we should rely on, but where it says an update will be provided to the board of directors and make any recommendations. That's the kind of thing that the board should acknowledge that it's received and discussed to whatever extent that it believes necessary. Even if it's only the treasurer.
Say they got it right.
Treasurer says this report, you've all got the report. A few words about it. Does anybody have any comment? No comment, then file it. But
I agree.
Right.
That hasn't been happening. We have asked for the report and looked at it in the past once or twice. Looked at it and decided, yeah, there's nothing in here that says F04 needs to be changed. So moving right along. Or anyway, I'll put this in a charging document. Next is B05. I don't know, Josh, can you put B05 up?
1 second.
In the meantime, I'm looking at my notes here. Okay. A couple of comments on this. In authority, we reference specifically in Article 10th in the charter, and then there's a section 5.14D. I don't know that 514D, I don't think has been changed in the in that section. Have been changed. 514 in particular have been changed in the recent referendum, but the Article 10th has been changed because of the amendment and restatement of the charter in 2013. There was a renumbering of the articles of the charter. So that in particular is a not necessary change, but it's something that can be changed. But this, I think it is appropriate to have this resolution reviewed in a charging document. If, now hang on a second, this is conflict of interest, and it's not a resolution on ethics. So there's a difference between the conflict of interest of, in the context of what I'll call material benefit to officers, employees, committee members of the association. There's a difference between material benefit and ethical considerations, and I'm not going to try to get into that. I don't think it's necessary, and I probably wouldn't do a good job anyway. But I do think it's appropriate to this be reviewed just simply for its content. If you can scroll down further to the end of it, Josh, can down to the signature area. Well, I guess I'm missing communication here. I believe it's the same resolution that's been in process, been in place for a number of years. Whether the extent that it's been properly reviewed, I at this point in time can't express other than, in addition to putting in the charging document, consideration needs to be made with regard to the contents of authority. There are other resolutions where that specific, okay, 2008, same one since 2008. And how well it's been reviewed since then, perhaps could be in question. But in the authority paragraph, Josh, go back up to the top again, please. We did in other resolutions make this generic, a generic reference to the charter and a bylaws reference, so that you didn't get stuck in a situation where there's been a renumbering of the articles in the charter or some kind of a revision to the sections of the bylaws. You wind up out of date. That, again, that's not important that get changed, but that's an area that can also be revised. But I think the appropriate thing is that we should ask for a review of this resolution, including consideration of having the attorney look at it. In fact, I'm not due partly to the fact it's a 14-year-old resolution and dealing with an item is got legal consequences to it. So that's my proposal for this resolution.
I agree with the charging document.
Makes sense.
I agree with the charging document.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, in the interest of keeping us on schedule, so to speak, let's go to F02. I'm sorry, F01. That's investment guidelines. If you would scroll down to where 2 is at the top of the screen. Oh, that's good. This, I'm not going to in any way go through this, but this illustrates the, I'm going to call it, details of the resolution. It's got all kinds of details regarding investments, proper investments of the investment process of the association. Now, Josh, if you continue to scroll down a little bit more, maybe the next, we'll get in the rest of, well, keep going. Okay. Just a little bit higher, where you get the financial services selection at the top. That's good. All right. Again, here, I think it's appropriate to send it to the board with a charging document for review. But what can be pointed out for possible consideration in the review is it has the board approving by written resolution, I don't know that it means resolution in the book of resolutions, but board action approving a investment services institution. And then it goes on to, they'll be reviewed at least annually by the Budget and Finance Advisory Committee and so forth. Whether or not that is current process. And then the second would be a delegation of authority that the treasurer and the general manager are given the responsibility of conducting investment transactions, whether that's the current process as well. Those two paragraphs or subparagraphs could be specifically pointed out as something that we think should be looked at for making sure that that is exactly what we're doing now. A charging document requesting review, pointing out these two subparagraphs as areas of attention, and for lack of a better word.
I agree with that. But you know what I'm seeing here is a trend. And this takes me back to my military days, where we had just gazillions of instructions and directives that required different things. And such as this, where a review was required, feedback was required, etc. And trying to keep track of all that stuff was almost impossible. And so what would happen is we would develop these matrices that would document that during this time frame, this report or this feedback is required. During this time frame, this is. And then the governing body, in this case, it would be the board, would have that as a tool. So whenever they would meet, they could look at that and go, oh, next month, we're supposed to be getting a feedback report on the effectiveness of XYZ. They could bring it up in the meeting. They could remind whomever to be prepared to provide that. And so these types of things don't get forgotten about, because when they're just buried in these instructions like this, I just feel like they're going to get overlooked. So I agree with what you're saying, Jim. We need a charging document, and maybe if we talk about this later and we can come to a consensus on a way to implement something like that, that could potentially be part of a future recommendation.
Yeah.
Over.
Okay.
Jim, can I just ask a question? In the subparagraphs preceding E and D, it looked like, Josh, can you scroll up a bit, a little bit more? I guess it was, keep going. Yeah, right here, A. Am I reading this correctly, that A, double I, and then all the subs that follow that? I guess what I'm curious about is in sending a charging document to the board, should we raise the question whether this level of specificity is even necessary? I'm not even sure that some of these, like certificates of deposit, those sort of things, bonds and bills, I mean, financial investment opportunities change incredibly often. I don't know that, I'm just wondering whether this level of specificity is necessary. And I don't know whether it's worthwhile to suggest to the board, they might want to take a look at this and find a simpler way to describe how we should be investing our money and, in this case, preserving the capital. I'm just asking the question.
I personally certainly can't answer that, although and again, I don't want to be superficial, but there's a treasurer's report at each board meeting, or at least that's the practice, that includes how the money is invested. That's maybe not a good description, but it's pretty. The investment practices that we're following now seem to be pretty basic. as opposed to the detail that you see here. So that I think that could be a legitimate question regarding the extensive detail. Is that
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the board's going to engage in the review that we're asking them to do as it applies to D&E, as a general matter, I'm just going to send the charging document anyway. Would it be appropriate to suggest to the board they may want to look at the level of specificity that's here to see whether or not that's still applicable for the way the association invests its money? That's all I'm suggesting. That's all.
Yeah, I agree that would, to me, it would be appropriate to suggest consideration of the details of the applicable paragraph. Okay, any other, what we're talking about is sending it out for review. And
You're going to send it out.
three areas of not question, but comment. One, the details are on investment categories, the details, the amount of detail, and secondly, the lost track of what the next two are. One is the review and approval of investment institutions and review by committee, and the other is the authorities regarding investment decisions. Those three areas, well, that's basically the entire resolution, but identify those in particular of areas that may want to be reviewed in particular. Is that
I agree.
is that a good enough way? Okay.
I agree.
I'll
I
take
agree.
that one. All right, Josh, if you can put up B02. Boy, moving right along here. While we're waiting here, B02 is the rules of order for board meetings. I personally don't have any comment on B02. Going back to the comments that were in the memo of May 3rd. There hadn't been any variation from the provisions of this resolution since it was originally approved.
I have one comment.
Okay.
So I'm surprised to see that first sentence in paragraph 3, because I mistakenly, my position has always been that Ocean Pines doesn't have a president, that our board of directors has a president. But that clearly says the chairperson of the board shall be the president of the association, vice the president of the board. And I don't know, that was just always an important distinction for me, because a president of the association sort of insinuates that person has some power or authority above and beyond the board itself, which I never thought, maybe mistakenly, was the case, that they were the president of the board and that all the power and authority rested with the board. So was I just mistaken that we Ocean Pines has a president?
Well, the officers of the association in the bylaws we have 4: president, vice president, and
Secretary,
treasurer and secretary. I'm calling up my copy of the book of resolutions here. Well, is it going to come up or not come? Here it is. I don't think we addressed who is the chairperson or chairperson of the of the board other than in this resolution, but the bylaws do specify the president, that there is a president of the association. I'm looking up something here. Hang on a second.
So while you're looking that up, is there some document somewhere that says what the president's responsibilities are other than these A, B, and C? Because all of these have to do with how to run the board.
Yeah, the bylaws have responsibilities of the president. Okay, in the bylaws, let me turn around here where maybe I can be heard or seen better. Hang on a second. I can't do this. I can never do this, so I'll wait for a second. Duties. The duties of the officer shall include, but not be limited to, those set forth in this section. This is 6.06 of the bylaws. A, president. The president should perform all duties incident to the office of president and all other duties assigned by the board of directors. These duties shall include: 1, acting as chairman at all meetings of the board of directors. I don't see anything about association member meetings, but it does specifically state that the president of the association is the chair of at the board members at the board meetings. I don't know if that's me and hitting the keyboard somewhere or not.
No, that was me. Sorry.
My papers are falling all over the place, and I can't get to the tab on the computer I want to get to, and let me try to get back to where I want to be here. Okay. Okay, Josh has got the bylaws up in front of us. Front of me, yeah. So I would
So,
highlighted president. And,
so who is it? Who determines who the chairperson is then?
Oh, the chairperson is of the board of directors. Meetings of the board is determined here.
In other words, the president acts as a chairperson.
Is the chairperson. That's the way I would have said it.
Yeah.
In B02, it says the chairperson shall be the president of the association.
So,
Bottom line is that we need to recommend changing anything.
I don't have any suggestions for changing it, other than, again, this is something that the board of directors it's their meetings, and I think it's appropriate for them to decide whether or not that there needs to be any kind of a change made to it. I mean, decorum and courtesy, I don't see any reason for that to change. Well, preserve order, I'm looking under the chairperson, preside, preserve order, decide points of order, decorum and courtesy, authorized attendees, that's pretty straightforward. Public comments is pretty straightforward, and that's the end of it. Well, voting. As far as I can tell, there hasn't been any variance from what's on here from the time it's been approved back, I think, back in 2008. Can't get it to go here. Yeah, 2008. And I don't know, but this is probably mostly just a reformatting of the resolution that existed in 2008. The format, the purpose, authority, and so forth was somewhat different in earlier revisions or earlier resolutions back before the current. So
could Josh go back to that? Put the resolution up that we're looking at then.
B02.
Whatever it is. Yeah.
B02.
And then scoot down to the bottom part that you were just looking at, that Jim was just talking about. Because I think, if memory serves me correct, didn't those of us who met in person that day, didn't we kind of talk about this, that the only thing, scoot back up to where it said public comment, please. Thank you. All right, wait a minute. Is this the one? I cannot remember is this the one where we were curious as to how the agenda was made, and in what order things were put? Because that public comment portion was the one that some people didn't like it when it was first thing in the meeting and nothing had been discussed by the directors yet, versus others, then it got moved. So are we saying that they have the ability to rearrange their agenda however they like? And this might not be the right place. I can't remember which one we had this discussion on.
Well, that would
Right
have
at the
been,
moment.
that would have
There is
been.
There is a B04 in the May 3rd memorandum, talks about agenda development for board meetings.
Maybe that's the one we were talking about, because I think it was just curious to us, because there was also that section where, like, we were talking about transparency and accountability, that there was we had always had updates on how many ARC violations there had been, and it didn't seem like that was consistent of late, to show up at the board, the directors meetings in the agenda. It might just say none, but then it wouldn't say, or no report, or it wouldn't say, well, we received 20 and all 20 were resolved, or something like that. I apologize. I can't remember exactly which one that fell under, where we had that discussion. So it may not even apply to this, so.
No, that was the agenda format.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
And that didn't really apply to this one.
gotcha, okay. It all starts to blur a little bit.
Yes,
It would-
I'll tell you
All
what,
right.
as you get older, it gets worse.
Yeah.
Great. No.
All right. Where we appear to be is just simply send out a request in a charging document for review of this resolution to the board.
In other words, you're
I
going to
agree.
send the request to review as a charging document, correct?
That's
And if
right.
you have
And-
notes, you're going to include the notes. Okay,
Right.
Well, there aren't any, at this point in time, we don't have any particular comments.
right, we don't.
Right.
But that thing is like 2.5 years past due.
All right, the next one on the agenda is M04. That's the maintenance of lots.
M04, let's see how far that is.
Uh,
So that's,
Okay, this, I'm going to try to keep this as short as I can. My comment leading into whatever discussion, I want to try to keep it as short as can. This basically is implementation of a declaration of restrictions provision. And what's in here is really not going to change unless there's a change in the declaration of restrictions. The declaration of restrictions vary from one section to another. I shouldn't say one section to another, one category or one grouping of sections to another. In one grouping, it has a 10-inch limit of grass and weeds, and another grouping of sections, it's 6 inches, as specified in the declaration of restrictions. That's why 3A says growth exceeds 10 inches or less if specified in the applicable DR is unsightly, is defined as unsightly growth. This simply says that Public Works, I don't know that it exactly says that, it says general manager probably, can go out, yeah, it says general manager in B, 3B, can go out and cut the grass and and charge the owner the fee for cutting the grass. This is going to change. The DRs aren't going to change unless there's an amendment to the DRs, which may or may not ever happen with this provision. I don't know that it's meaningful to have this resolution reviewed by the board of directors. Maybe we want to tell the board, we've looked at this is a DR provision implementation, and unless the specific DR provision is changed, there's no reason to come back and review or amend as appropriate this resolution. Anyway, hopefully I kind of made my comment reasonably clear, but if I haven't, let me know in any discussion on that.
Yeah, I think it's straightforward. Just ask them to review it and tell us it's okay to change the review date.
I thought all this kind of stuff about lots and maintenance and grass and all that, I thought all that was in the ARC guidelines, no?
I'm not sure if this is in the design ARC guidelines or not, to tell you the truth.
I mean, ARC guidelines got all kinds of lot maintenance-ish kind of stuff in there.
Yeah.
It's not just about design. It's about what you can have parked in your driveway and, you know, signs, you know, there's all kinds of stuff in there about it. So I don't know. The first thing I think of when I see this is why wouldn't this be part of the ARC? Why is this a resolution? Now, I could see it needing to be a resolution if we need to say, if the ARC committee determines that some maintenance has to be performed on a lot for whatever reason, that this provides some sort of authority to the board to do that. But, you know, to put in the resolutions, how high the grass has got to be, I don't know. Just, am I off here? Is anybody else?
Hang on a second. Let me get back to the actual resolution. I don't know. What I'm doing is calling it up on the website. I'm not sure what we have on the. Come on. Why I have trouble doing this. And this has been brought up before, and nobody's given it much thought. The key two things, and they're both in paragraph 3. What is unattractive growth is a specific height of grass or weeds as specified in the Declaration of Restrictions. The Declaration of Restrictions, again, depending on which section you're in, it could say 10 inches or it could say 6 inches. That's a Declaration of Restrictions provision. It's a requirement on a homeowner. Now, the next thing is the implementation of what the association is going to do about it. And it says in B, and I'm reading this. Everybody may have it where they can read it themselves, but in the event the growth of grass or weeds exceeds that's specified in the paragraph above, the general manager is authorized to have agents or employees of the association to enter and maintain and restore by cutting the grass or weeds, and have the cost added to the annual charge invoice. That the words that are here, whether they're the exact words or not, are the same as a predecessor resolution that went into place back in 2008, 9, 10, whenever it was. Now, I don't recall what the there's an amendment May 2nd, 2020. I don't recall what that was. I'd have to look it up. It could very well have been the authority where it says it may not have had, it may have had different authority. I don't remember. Doesn't make any difference. Let me get to the point. The prior resolution specifically stated that this was adopted by a certain number or not number, but certain vote of the association's board of directors such that it complied with the DR restriction allowing the association to go onto a property and make whatever repairs the board authorized to be made. That's where the roof is coming apart, the front steps are falling apart, you know, shutters are falling off, whatever. If the association wants to pay for it, go have it done and then bill the owner. The directors can do that by, I think it's a 2/3 majority vote. The prior resolution specifically had words into it indicating that this resolution had been approved by a 2/3 of majority of vote. Therefore, the GM could go do it whenever he felt like it was necessary to go do it. That's missing from this resolution. And that's the only thing that really would be in question on this resolution. I was going to look up the ARC guidelines. I'm not sure I can get to it fast enough to satisfy what we're trying to do here. I don't know, Josh, you might be able to if you're.
All the ARC guidelines require compliance with the Declaration of Restrictions. So even if it's in the ARC guidelines, and they're incorrect, they have to abide by the Declaration of Restrictions for that section, correct?
Oh yeah, the guidelines can't.
Right. So the guidelines for ARC are a little bit different than this resolution.
All right, hang on a minute. I'm in the guidelines now. General provisions, landscaping. Yeah, I don't want to.
Well, aren't we just saying that in terms of, for lack of a better term, upkeep or appearance, the DR is governed? That's so the only question is, if there's a violation of the particular DR, can the general manager go in, make the fix that's got to be made, and then charge the homeowner?
That's what this current M04 says, and what you just said is pretty closely the reason why that vote of the board of directors was deleted from the current resolution. It was viewed as nothing more than the enforcement of an existing restriction. Yeah.
So I apologize. I guess I'm missing something. I'm not sure what the issue is here.
Well, it should be reviewed, but the question really is, does it have to be reviewed on a periodic? My question is, does it have to be periodically reviewed like every 2 years? Because if the DRs don't change, nothing's going to change.
Right. And if
unless we want to take away from the GM the authority to go out and do it.
Well, no, I don't think. I mean,
and I don't think we do either. Let's put it that way.
The DRs do change, then that's for that section. That's what applies. The only remaining issue is if the DRs change, can the GM still go in and make the repair that's necessary to make consistent with that change? And this resolution says, yes, they can, because the DRs will always govern.
Right.
Yeah.
My suggestion, I'm going to suggest a two-part suggestion. One is we advise the board that we have looked at this and see no reason to have any amendment to it unless the board in its own wisdom wants to come back and tell us that they want to do something different. The second is that we would say we're going to discontinue a routine periodic review, and it would be reviewed only in case there is a DR change affecting the provision regarding unsightly growth.
Yeah.
Just if we're advising them that our look at it, it doesn't need to be revised. And, you know, if you think otherwise, let us know. And that decision, as far as I'm concerned, could be made by our liaison or informal contact with other board members. And secondly, we're not gonna send this to you for review every 2 years or wherever. We're only gonna look at it if and when the applicable provision in the DR is changed.
Right.
That would be an advisory to our liaison.
And
Correct.
I would just add that, and we are informed about the change in the DR.
Well, okay, I agree.
Right, yeah.
Unless
We don't
it's your own.
want to find out after the fact, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
We're running along, but we're down to the last one. And that's B06, the indemnification policy. Okay. Again, this is another one where in the authority, the article has changed because of the renumbering in the 2013 amendment and restatement. Josh, could you move it up just a little bit further? I can't seem to get rid of that. Okay, that's good enough. I can't get rid of that
Bar.
hang up bar and so forth.
Yeah.
Indemnification of volunteers. And it goes on to say, in case the person's not employed by association, in the event persons not employed by association act as volunteers for the official function. This goes into indemnification. This is liability and indemnification. It's covered in the charter. The charter references a Maryland Corporations Code article, not article, but section within the corporation's article. The code specifically refers to directors, officers, and agents of the corporation. It does not specifically refer to volunteers unless you would consider a volunteer to be effectively the same thing as an agent. And what we're volunteers in the context here, I think would apply to, well, it could apply to committee members for that matter. And people, you have some kind of a event, association event up at the Veterans Memorial in various parks where you have a lot of parking and people out, association members out directing traffic for the event, and something happens. The code article does not specifically refer to volunteers, but it was extended in possibility of indemnification under the requirements. And basically, it's under the requirements of the code article. Refers only to directors, officers, and agents. My suggestion is that we put this in a charging document for review, specifically point out the provision for volunteers. And I frankly don't remember if that came into this I'm sure replaced an earlier resolution, and I don't know if it had volunteers in it or not. I'd have to look it up. But recommend that this revision be, this resolution be reviewed by the attorney with regard to its provisions as reference to the code section on indemnification, and in particular the reference to indemnification of volunteers. In effect, I'm suggesting this needs to be reviewed and needs to be reviewed by the attorney. Something that probably should have been done in 2008, where it doesn't have anything signature by the attorney.
Jim, if you know, is there anything in the code that prohibits indemnification of volunteers, or is it just left up to each individual HOA?
Well, it's not in it's in the corporation's article. And and I went back and read through it. I don't want to say I read through it, I skimmed through it again, as opposed to reading it piece word by word. I don't see any reference other than directors, officers, and agents.
So there's no ban on expending it beyond which is employees and agents. In other words, there's nothing in the code that says, using your example, for instance, the volunteers at the Veterans Plaza, directing traffic, and God forbid they get hit by someone pulling out of their space or something. So
I don't recall seeing anything that prohibits the
Right.
association from extending
Right.
indemnification provision to volunteers.
okay, yeah,
I mean, somebody's volunteers acting on behalf, not acting, but performing or acting on behalf of the association. If they're acting on behalf of the association, they're an agent. But again, my suggestion is, and this may be a belated one from 2008, is this be reviewed, and it be reviewed by the attorney, and in particular be reviewed by the extension to volunteers.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that I will mark off. I don't want to rush us through here. Yeah, I'm looking at the time. We have effectively gotten through everything that is overdue. And I don't believe we've got the governance document review as the next item on the agenda. I don't think we need to get that document out and look at it. Bob can update it from what we've decided today. Bob, there are three resolutions that requests have been sent out to committee chairs, so that what you don't have now, and I'll send it to you in an email, is the date that I've requested a response, after which no response will simply indicate review. I'll send that information to you by email. It's July 1st, but I'll send the exact resolutions. So I don't propose we go through the governing document review at this time. So again, before we adjourn, is there anything else? Okay, before I ask if we can adjourn, our next meeting is July 15th, same time, same day of the week, a Friday. This one is, the Peach Room is reserved. That's for in person. If somebody can't make it in person, it's going to be available for hybrid virtual, and it also be recorded situation. So the next one is Peach Room, July 15th.
Sounds good.
Okay, hey, anybody want to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, I will take it as unanimous, and then there's some of this stuff I'm going to be out sending to you to make sure that I've got straight what you want us to go out with. So I'll be working on that in the next couple of days.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
All right, I'm going to assume that we're
Thank
adjourned. I
you.
assume we're adjourned.